CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.
Hello, my name is Masego Madzwamuse. I am the host of the Adoye podcast series, Season 2, that is part of our 2026 gathering, which is held in partnership with the Nawi Collective and the Center of African Philanthropy and Social Investment under the Adoye program. And we're bringing together a group of fabulous women, Pan-African feminists, 30 women who have come together for this writing retreat. And we are curating a space that recognizes writing as political work, storytelling as a site of healing, and community as essential to sustaining feminist thought and creativity on the continent. And through the podcast, you'll get to hear about the incredible work that the individuals who are part and who are participating in this year's retreat are involved in. Hi, welcome to Season 2 of Adoye podcast series, where we bring together a group of African women writers who are part of the Women's Writers Retreat that we organize at the beginning of every year. This is the second cohort. The first retreat we organized was last year, and we are really delighted to have with us about 30 women in the space who are weaving, creating, birthing, and telling beautiful stories about themselves and our continent. My first guest for today is Mūthoni. And before I go any further with introducing you, Mūthoni, I would like for you to introduce yourself to our listeners by telling us who you are and whose you are.
So, as you said, my name's Mūthoni Wanyeki. I'm a mixed-race Kenyan, half Canadian, half Kenyan, born and brought up in Nairobi. I'm a political scientist. I would say I'm a feminist, I'm a leftist, I'm a Pan-Africanist. That's on who I am. I've spent about 3 decades working towards positive social change on the continent in the areas of democracy, human rights, peace and security. I've written a lot and now I'm trying to write creatively. Hence being here. Whose am I? Well, as I mentioned, I'm mixed race. So on my mother's side, I'm Canadian of Scottish ancestry. On my father's side, I'm Gikuyu, Kenyan. But I thought about this a bit more after we did this exercise, saying hello to each other. And I think I come from very many different political traditions as well. So I come from the tradition of women of color, feminists of color, organizing in Canada in solidarity with First Nations women. On the continent, I would say I have many different political communities. I have a political community in Kenya. I have a Pan-African community that works around the African Union and issues of African crises. I have a Pan-African feminist community who I've worked with for decades. So there are many traditions I come from, and of course all of those traditions have their antecedents before my generation. And increasingly I can see we have our we have our precedents, and I can see the antecedents. The next generation, which is it's an interesting realization to realize, they're new actors in the field. No, that's great.
And we have some of them with us here in the space, and it's just been so enriching. And of course, I did the typical thing of going straight into asking you about yourself without introducing myself to the listeners, because I'm just so excited to speak to you. That's one. I'm Masego Madzwamuse, and I'm one of the conveners for the African Women's Writers Circle. And we thought to do this work because we felt it was really important for African women to carve the space and the time to write and shape their own narratives in a safe space where we don't have to be talking back. We can write in our own voice, unintercepted. And your work and the track record speaks for itself. As you introduce yourself, you are a political scientist. I would like to say one of the most renowned African women political scientists that we have in our continent. And you have been writing. What made you respond to the call this time around to join us? But what is it about shifting into the creative writing space in this juncture for you?
So at the end of 2023, I had a very serious bout of malaria, falciparum malaria, which is cerebral malaria. And I was in hospital for 6 weeks, in a coma for 2 weeks. My kidneys failed, my lungs collapsed. It was very, very serious. When I came out, I was released to the care of a home nurse and a physiotherapist. I had to learn how to walk again. It took a while for my speech not to be slurred. It's still slurred in French more than in English. And I think going through a health challenge like that, it took almost a year for the pain walking to go away. And for someone who's always been very physical and very used to having my body do what I want it to do, and yeah, just talk fast, move fast, think fast, and all of a sudden not to be able to do that made me really slow down. It's very humbling. It's very frustrating. Let me not lie, but it's also very humbling. And when I came out into the context of the organization I worked for, going through a second reorganization with which I did not agree. So I left. Unfortunately, the terms that my team had fought for, severance terms, were really actually quite generous. So it included an educational allowance. And I thought about it. I was like, oh, you know, I have a PhD. What do I need another degree for? Then I thought about a professional course. I was like, over my dead body, I'm not doing a professional course. And I was like, okay, well, what do you love that you've never been able to do? And creative writing. And I've said all my life, I want to write. I want to be a creative writer, not just a writer academically or a writer journalistically or you know, all the other ways I've written. So I found the Open University of the UK, which is online. It's not very expensive. And that's what I'm doing. I'm doing an MA in creative writing, and it's been a blast. Like, I've loved it. I've loved the course, loved the platform, loved the writing. So then, towards the end of last year, I got the invitation to come here. I was like, huh? I was so perplexed. I was like, who on earth knows that A, that I'm still alive, B, that I'm writing? And then I scrolled down to the list of organizers and I saw Naui, and the director of Naui, of course, is a good friend of mine. I was like, oh, she's responsible.
Yes.
And yeah, of course, then I had to come.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I came.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah.
The group is amazing. The teaching is very interesting. It's technical, but it's not technical in the way that I'm being taught creative writing. It's technical in the sense of taking as a starting point what it means to write as an African woman and what you are going against from the very start, right? So politics of peer review, metaphor, you know, the structure of stories and the flow of stories. It's actually been wonderful. And also what's been really nice is not everyone here is working on fictional stories or poetry or screenwriting or any of the creative writing genres. Some people are working on memoirs or on books on leadership or, you know, music archiving. And that's also been really nice to just sort of see the broad expanse that writing can cover. And everyone, you know, tentatively taking their little steps towards whatever their dream is. It's been wonderful. So I feel very lucky, very privileged, very happy to be here. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. We're really privileged to have you, and thank you for sharing your journey with us and sharing as well the health challenges that you faced. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but we're really glad that you come out on the other side. There's something important that you say about when you had to slow down and realizing, and I wouldn't even say realizing because you have always been writing. I think it's a way of recalling the power of stories and then going off and taking advantage of this learning degree and exploring it. Because one of the concepts that we explore is writing as healing practice, so that the stories and the messages, the knowledge that we then share as sisters and as people is one that really comes and represents the whole of who we are, without us dialing ourselves back. So I'm really glad you left that. And most importantly, grateful for your health.
Me too.
And the other thing that I wanted to pull out as a thread is around, I mean, you talk about the slowing down, which is why we take off this 2 weeks at the beginning of the year before the many, many demands on our time. But to hear a little bit more about the themes that you are exploring for yourself in this retreat, you shared with us that one of the things that you're passionate about is African solutions for African problems. And just looking at the state of the world at the moment and the state of multilateralism as we know it, governance as we know it, and curious about what your reading of the continent is in these times and how you might be pulling that out in what you're exploring.
So I think Africa, like the rest of the world, is really in a situation of deep decline, and it's easy to become despairing. We see for example, the intense loss of life in Sudan, the completely inadequate response, the complete contempt of the belligerents towards their own people. We see, shockingly, events that we saw in Tanzania around the election, which the president would have won anyway. But the behavior towards the citizens was, I think, even for people who were seasoned like me, who had come out of the second liberation struggle and thought we've moved ahead, were very shocked. There's an election tomorrow in Uganda. Violence is similarly going to be deployed. You know, we have the situation of the resurgence of military coups in West Africa, not just West Africa, but also Egypt, Sudan, Zimbabwe, and so on, coups by other names, and Palestine. And, you know, the wild behavior of the American president. I mean, I was speechless at the beginning of the year when he abducted a whole sitting president.
Yeah.
And I mean, it does not matter what you think of
Yeah.
democracy in Venezuela. Like, how can you do that?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, basically, every constraint that we thought we had on behavior of states,
Yeah.
globally as well as within Africa, has been removed, right? We're living with the nakedness of people in political power and what they will do to consolidate that power, to maximize its economic benefits for themselves and for the elites around them. And I think that can make people despairing. But we also live in a time of amazing youth organizing. In Kenya, we had Gen Z. I mean, there's been Gen Z in Morocco, there's been Gen Z in Sri Lanka, there's been Gen Z, like all over the place, right? And that follows on earlier youth protest movements in South Africa, Fees Must Fall, the police issues and SARS. In Nigeria, of course, the revolutions in North Africa. And, you know, we can critique Gen Z actors for being single issue, for being unable to sustain their revolutions, for not entering the mainstream. You know, we've heard it all, the critique but they are brave, right? They know the kind of world they want to live in. They know the expectations they have of states, of our states, and of the world. They're cosmopolitan, they're, you know, actually national actors in their national context, but Pan-African, global. They're fully aware, and even though, for instance, Palestine might make us despairing, the kind of people's mobilization that our young people are part of across the world has, in my mind, changed the political culture already. I think the only good thing about times like this is that eventually we're going to have to start coming up. You can't run the world on fear and coercion and violence infinitely. It is not the nature of people to want to live in that kind of world. And so, yeah, we're at an inflection point, and I think young people are showing us the kind of worlds they want to live in, which actually are the kinds of worlds we've been fighting for all our lives, right? So I'm personally really charged by it. You know, I'm part of East African, intergenerational, partly politicians, partly civil society, old, run by young people in Kenya, responding to Tanzania and Uganda. The coordinators of that initiative, you know, it's informal, but they work so hard. They're like totally on top of things. You know, I just sit back, I'm like, okay, if you need a document edited, I can edit it. I don't have to do anything. Whereas my whole life was like, up to now has been, there's a crisis, we have to do this, we have to do that, so-and-so's go there, so-and-so, you know. I'm not having to do any of that. It's very relaxing. To realize there is a generational shift, right? So then the question is, for people like you, for me, my peers within the feminist, Pan-African, Kenyan political space is really, what's our obligation? What's our use and utility? And I do think writing is part of it.
Yes, absolutely.
That's a very long way of answering your question.
It's a perfect way, because one of the things that you're drawing out, which raises a question that I have, is I read Africa and what you've laid out, and look at Africa in the world, and as you rightfully say, we have a lot of youth uprising to confront in very brave ways authoritarian rule, fascism, and all the other isms that are emerging, and some of them a continuation. And when I read that in the backdrop of what is happening in the US and civil society response, there are many times where I have looked at it and said, if only you could have conversations with movements and people who are in Africa, who are in Latin America, who are in other parts of the world, who've had to navigate a system that was different. And we learn how you are set and continue to claim rights and push boundaries and make the political leaders uncomfortable, we could get to the end much, much quicker. So I look at that and I ask myself, and maybe this is, I could be taking a cue from you and saying, I can sit back and say, can I print paper? But I'm sitting with this question, which is around, what does it look like to build the solidarity networks at a global level that actually shifts the system in the continent and is also able to change the playfields globally? And we can indeed push back at what Trump is doing, because it has a knock-on impact on everyone, everywhere in the world, including in the continent. So I'm just wondering what it looks like to connect those struggles. And
so I'll give some examples that come from the work I was doing immediately prior to stopping work. My counterpart for Eurasia, I was in charge of the Africa work, and I had a counterpart for Eurasia who was in charge of the former Soviet republics and Russia. And she also left the organization earlier than I did and used the experience to set up something called Stroika, which is very much how do you confront authoritarianism. And of course, people who've lived under Russian rule recently or in the former Soviet past, they've gone through things that I wouldn't say we can't imagine, but are kind of like to the extreme of, well, we also went through things like that. But they're very experienced in operating in authoritarian spaces and confronting it safely. And her and another colleague set up Stroika, and that's what they're doing. And, you know, it's interesting. She says they're more in demand in the US now than they've ever been before. And they're doing precisely that, trying to show Americans how other people have done it around the world without the taken for granted guardrails of law, order, good behavior. I mean, those things are gone, right? So how do you operate? When we worked in the same organization, we began a body of work on Russia's return to Africa. And we were linking independent journalists, African journalists, with Russian journalists directly to talk about the then use by the Russian state of Wagner, which is now transformed and become something else, but the tactics still the same, in some of our conflict areas. And we also began a body of work with our colleagues in the Middle East on Israel and Africa and what had happened to the pro-Palestinian movement across Africa. What was Israel's projection of soft power, and why is it that African solidarity with Palestine has declined over the years? We began a body of work with Latin America on, you know, the rise to power of kind of lefty black feminist leadership in Brazil and Colombia specifically. And, you know, I'm sorry I left before all those bodies of work gained traction, but what we were doing was seeding people who are doing the work locally, but can see, I need to make these connections. I need to understand this dynamic on the continent, and I need to understand this dynamic in the world. And I, fast forward to the present, I really do feel part of my service at this point in time is just linking people. I've had the incredible privilege to work across Africa, to work globally, to work in 2 global institutions, and be aware of all of this stuff, and be aware where Africans can tap into, you know, networks, resistance, partners, potentially, alternative news, even. And that's what I find myself doing a lot, is sort of listening to people. Okay, reach out to so-and-so, reach out to so-and-so. And I think that's your job as a transiting, older, gray-haired, wiser. Well, I don't know about that. We would like to think so, but anyway, I think that's what we can do, is just help make contacts, make connections, and in our writing and in our work to always try and foreground those connections as well, of solidarity across the continent, but also solidarity with each other for what we need to achieve in the world, despite the idiocies of all our leaders, you know, with very few exceptions, unfortunately.
So it's the connections, and then you also lift that, it's also the stories, right? Because you also come from a long history of the women's rights movement. And one of the things that we know about the moments in history where we've seen those solidarity networks develop. For instance, the solidarity networks that developed between the Black African American women and women in the global south or in the continent. Historically, we've seen how that has been instrumental in shifting things. So there's the individual connection that you do, you know, call so and so, do you know this organization, and put them together. But there's also the stories and the archiving and the documentation. Is there anything that you were reading that you would recommend others to read if they want to understand where the organizing is taking place, where the experiences with solidarity and network building, coalition building has been taking place, what we've learned over the years, where we've failed? And
so I mean, there are several sort of, I would say, seminal kind of grounding sites that anyone who's active of any current generation should familiarize themselves with. So when it comes to sort of progressive social theories, social political theory, Cadastria, and you know, we've lost some of our great mountains of thinkers, Samira Min, Tandika Mkariri, Abdallah Bujra, and each time there's been a loss of such a baobab, Cadastria has done a special issue dedicated to them. And the special issues are in and of themselves like a whole journey through African intellectual thought, debate, activism. You know, I find it so interesting because they're, of course, my seniors, right? But I think Gen Z would find it interesting as well. So there's that. There's the Feminist Africa, and Professor Sylvia Tamale is actually in the process of editing a commemorative issue, 20 years of the African Feminist Charter, and there are many pieces that talk about the history of African feminist organizing, what the Charter meant, and brought to the space of organizing. Again, I think it will be seminal, but also people should familiarize themselves with Feminist Africa. That's what I would say for now.
Thank you. Cadastria was actually one of the very first institutions to give us a grant for convening.
Oh, wow.
We wrote to them and we just got a straightforward yes. Yes, please do this. It's really important.
Wonderful.
But yeah, they have been instrumental in really making sure that we curate, we write, we archive, and that we make sure that information is indeed available for future generations and people who are doing the work currently. I can't believe we have
come to the end of half an hour. Let's not bore our listeners by going on.
What would be your last words for our listeners? What are you looking forward to?
Writing.
Yeah.
Doing something with my writing is the next step. Of course, I've done tons of academic, policy, journalistic writing, but I don't know, there's something more intimidating about creative writing. So, baby steps.
Where can people find your work if they wanted to read one of your pieces? Not yet. Well, be on the lookout for what Mūthoni gets to write. Right. Mūthoni, thank you so much.
Thank you, Masego.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.